Okay, we're going to start. Sorry for the lateness. We were just at another event out at Highfield Heights. Went very well there, Deputy Mayor. Good crowd. So before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And tonight's public meeting is to hear comments, questions, or concerns on the following applications. But before I name off those applications, I just want to introduce our counselor to my right, Councillor Greg Rivard. To your left, to my right, to your left, the Deputy Mayor Jason Cody. To my left and to your right, Councillor McCabe, who will be chairing the meeting because Councillor McLeod is not with us tonight. And I was just told he's going to be arriving late. Next to Councillor McCabe is Councillor Alana Yankoff, Councillor Michael Duffy, Councillor Terry Bernard, and Councillor Kevin Ramsey. Is Councillor Duran on the phone? Okay. And do we have anyone else? Are we missing anyone else? That's it. Yeah, just 1 second. Okay. Applications 93 and 95 Cumberland Street. So our staff person will be Robert Zilke. Alex will be substituting, correct, Alex? Okay. Greg Clayton will be via WebEx. 50 Cumberland Street, Laurel Palmer Thompson. So she'll be doing both, Alex? Okay. And there's Ryan Faubert, Kim Griffin, and Angus Orford from Maritime Electric. Welcome. And there will be bylaw amendments with Alex Forbes. PEI is currently in step 3 of the transition plan to living with COVID-19. Public health guidance indicates that the province is moving from population and health measures and restrictions to a situation where individuals will access their own risk based on the number of factors, including their own health and vaccine status and that of others and the type of activity or event they are attending. Therefore, we are back to in-person meetings at this time. In addition, residents will have the option to participate via video conference, WebEx, if they prefer. The meeting is also live streamed on YouTube. So if you miss it tonight, you can go home and go to YouTube, City of Charlottetown Planning, and recording this meeting can be assessed after the meeting. And the video link is very easy, www.charlottetown.ca video, or go to YouTube. Basil Hambley. Is Basil with us tonight? Don't see Basil. Okay. Bob Kenny is here. He's one of our planning board members. I see Mr. Paul Connolly is here. I see a former councillor here, Cecil Villard. Good to see you, Cecil. And I think we have Rosemary Hebert and Shaylin. Are they in by WebEx? Great. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Councillor Julie McCabe, and she will do the order of event for each presentation. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight on this warm, hot evening. As you know, there are 3 applications that we'll hear from. There will be a brief presentation by staff who will come up. And at that time, anyone in the audience who would like to speak to the application will be invited to come up to the mic. All we do ask is that you give us your name and maybe the community you live in so we can have that for the minutes. And the only other thing we're going to ask is that when people are speaking, we'll all be respectful. They have 5 minutes at the mic. And at that time, we'll be giving you a little warning to say, thank you for your 5 minutes. So we will start, and we'll start with 93 and 95 Belvedere Avenue. And Alex is going to, no, it's 93 Belvedere Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and This is the application. The subject properties are up on the presentation. The location is on Belvedere Avenue near Blaze Pizza or the old A&W or Subway, which one you wish to pick. The university has acquired those properties in the last few years. They would like to integrate them into their larger holding. They would like to rezone them to institutional, and they would like to consolidate those two properties again with their larger holdings. The specific request is to change both the designation and the zone from low-density residential to institutional, and then consolidate both subject properties with 560 University Avenue, which is the UPEI campus. And I think at the planning board, there was a request by one of the planning board members to get some kind of an understanding of how these two properties fit in with the larger university campus master plan. You can see that for the most part, with the exception of the property on the corner, and there is one single-family dwelling beside this on Belvedere Avenue. For the most part, that whole area is owned by the university. So again, the opportunity came up. They purchased the two properties. They would like to integrate them back into their larger holding. That is my presentation, but Greg Clayton, on behalf of UPI, is available on WebEx, and he would, I think he will be addressing you at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Can you hear me okay? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yes, well, Alex pretty well did my presentation. It's just a couple of slides. Basically, maybe just if you go to the next slide, it's just a recap of what Alex had said in 2004. We purchased 95 Belvedere Avenue. And then in 2015, we purchased 93 Belvedere Avenue. And as he said, these properties are currently zoned low density residential, and we're planning to have them changed to institutional zoning, which is the same as the rest of our campus. We're requesting to have these two parcels of land consolidated with the main campus. Could you just go to the next slide, please? So the area, Alex's slide actually showed it a little better, was beside the Blaze Pizza, just beyond the Blaze Pizza on Belvedere Avenue. This whole acquiring the land is just to help better define the southern edge of the campus on Belvedere Avenue, similar to how we have it well defined the western edge on University Avenue. So part of our overall plan is just to have a better edge definition for the campus, and like Alex said, provide some more space by Belvedere Avenue. So the plan right now is for this to remain a green space. But as campus demands continue to grow and evolve, the use of the land can change on anywhere on our campus, and to support this demand. Any changes that we use or do down the road would go through the appropriate application process. This would ensure the institutional zone allows for it, and future development confirms with the applicable regulations. That would be the use of what we want to use it for, appropriate setbacks, et cetera, for that type of zone. So yeah, it's part of our overall plan to continue to develop our beautiful campus.
All right, Alex. Okay, so we will open the mic up for any questions to Alex or Greg Clayton.
May I ask a question, please?
Just
Now, it clearly states there the
Dr. Newman,
intent of the application.
can you just give us your name, please?
Louis Newman.
Oh, can you give us your name, please? Okay. Thank you.
It says in the application, the intent of the application is for the subject properties to remain as green space once consolidated with the main campus. But the previous speaker clearly said that they may change their minds and use it for development. So why is that sentence there at all? It's misleading. It makes us think that it's going to be green forever, but that's not the case. So please take that out of the application because it's misleading.
Alex, you want to give some clarification?
Mr. Clayton may be able to answer that a little bit better. I think the way that I interpret that is at this time that they don't have an intended purpose for the property. So the short-term future is green space. But Mr. Clayton, if you wanted to ask him a little bit more, there's no requirement for this property for it to remain as green space, but he's asking for a rezoning, and you folks can take that into consideration. But I think what he was trying to, Mr. Clayton or the university is just indicating they want to put it back into their property for the interim period. It'll be green space, but as you can see, there's a lot of green space on their property, and I think he's indicating that they just don't know what demands will dictate in the near future. But yeah, maybe Mr. Clayton could clarify that a little further.
Mr. Clayton, you
Sure.
want
Sure. This slide is from our updated revised campus plan, master plan, which was done in 2018. And it shows that this space is currently is designated as green space. But as we know, campus demands can change over time. We're fortunate that we have a campus that is thriving and growing demand. So, we don't know what the future will bring for any of our spaces on campus. So what we would obviously want to do as we continue to grow, develop, is to work with the city through its application process to ensure whatever we do on our property goes through the proper processes and the appropriate use of the land and setbacks, et cetera, are completed.
Alex, could you just give us some of the institutional uses? Just off, I know, or Laurel?
Give me 1 second. Okay. So in the institutional zone, you can have a cemetery, a club, a commercial daycare, community building, community care facility, community institutional, cultural establishment, dormitory, educational institution, private, educational institution, public, fire stations, funeral establishment, government office, hospital, library, lodging, medical health office, nursing home, place of worship, police station, public utility, recreation or fitness, and a transitional housing facility. But again, I'm not going to speak on UPEI, but I would suspect their primary interest is going to be, educational institution public uses.
Dr. Newman, okay? Thank you. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. We're not seeing any other speakers for that application, so we're going to move on to the second application, which is 50 Cumberland Street, PID 679381, and Laurel is going to present. Oh, I'm sorry. Back up the train here for a minute. Councillor Duffy had a question for the university application.
For Mr. Forbes on the first application. Mr. Forbes, I was just wondering, is there going to be, I hope there's not going to be any negative effect on the Public Works plan to develop the University Belvedere Avenue corner, where there's going to be 3 lanes of traffic, one turning left into the city, one turning north out to the university and one straight ahead on Belvedere Avenue. These two lots are before the pizza shop there, the new pizza shop.
Right.
This green space are number 2 and 3 lots along the line there behind so it's not going to have any detrimental effect to Mr. Adams's plans to have because the people are really anxious to have a 3-way passage of traffic at that corner, because if you're going straight ahead or turning right, you're all in the same lane, and a lot of people don't get through. So I assume there's going to be no negative effect.
Again, at this time, we would be removing 2 single-family dwelling driveways. And then in the future, they would have to then reapply if they wanted to come out onto Belvedere. Then Mr. Adams would be reviewing that at that time. So again, in this case, we would be removing 2 driveways that were
Thank you.
formerly there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any more questions from the council? Okay, thank you, Councillor Duffy. Okay, sorry, Laurel. We'll now move on to 50 Cumberland Street.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, ladies and gentlemen and the public. This is an application to amend an existing development concept plan and amend Appendix B comprehensive development area parcels and permitted uses of the zoning and development bylaw to include PID number 679381 with listed use as industrial equipment building, utility power plant under Section 44 comprehensive development area of the zoning and development bylaw. The request is to allow the construction of a new industrial equipment building. The application also involves the demolition of the existing steam plant and the steam stacks. So in context, the property in question, it's located on Cumberland Street. Access to the site is at the base of Richmond Street. The proposed building will be located on PID number 679381. It's shown here highlighted in red. It is 2.41 acres, and it's bounded to the north by Grafton Street, to the east by Land Zone CDA, to the south by CDA Zone Lands and Water Street, and to the west by R3 Medium Density Residential, Institutional Zone Lands, and Cumberland Street. So that's just a very brief overview, and I'm going to pass the presentation over to Ryan Faubert of Maritime Electric, if you'd like to come up.
I guess we can, council, your worship, members of the public, thank you for the opportunity. If we can go to the next slide. Oh, just go back there. We have applied to our regulator to have the steam plant. The steam plant's a thermal plant that burns heavy fuel oil, creates steam, and generates electricity by putting steam through steam turbines. It's the large building that's on the property. Is this laser too?
Laser is bottom.
Oh, wonderful. So,
Except the hold it. Sorry, it's the top one.
top one? Okay. Oh, here we go. Perfect. So that's this building right here and this building right here. And that process, we have approval from our regulator to tear down that building, but we're in the process right now of getting the environmental impact. Over the last year, over the last number of years, we've been removing all sorts of product like asbestos and that from the building so that when the building is torn down, it'll just be a straight tear down. That's another application altogether. But in order to tear down this building, we have to build a smaller building that will house equipment that's associated with this right here. And this right here is a combustion turbine. It's a jet engine. It's essentially the same type of jet engine that you would find under a 757, and it's a 50 megawatt generator. And there's equipment that's associated with that unit that's in our steam plant building. When we built that combustion turbine and assembled it, the least cost alternative was to with the equipment that's associated with that building was to put it in vacant areas of the steam plant building. But now we're tearing down the steam plant building. And in order to be able to tear down the steam plant building, we have to take the equipment, we call it the CT3 equipment, because that's our combustion turbine number 3, and put it into this new building. And this new building will house its equipment like reverse osmosis, its water purification, control equipment for the combustion turbine. What's the dimensions of the building?
The building is 65 feet by 55 feet by 25 feet high.
So through this application, we're looking for the permit to start construction of that building. And is there any questions?
Angus Orford presented there, and I know, thank you for doing that. Question, just come to the mic.
There's a couple more slides that I could.
Oh, sure.
Do you want to go over those first, Ryan?
Angus, just.
You have to use the mic.
Thank you. My name is Ryan Faubert. Thank you for having me tonight. Angus did an excellent job portraying the project. I'll just jump through a few additional slides that portray a few characteristics of the building. As stated previously, the building is 65 feet by 55 feet by 25 feet high. It's a two-story building. It'll be located in the parking lot adjacent to the jet engine that Angus discussed previously, CT3. It's pictured on this slide here. This is a view from Holland College showing our jet. And the timeline for the project, if approved through permitting, we could potentially begin in October, and construction would essentially last for the duration of a year, concluding in summer of 2023. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Mic's open. Just introduce yourself by name and place. Thank you.
My name is Brian Gillis. I'm a resident of Charlottetown. And I'd ask permission if I can sit down because I have a breathing issue and I cannot stand and talk at the same
I
time.
think the mic is mobile.
It's taped.
Just pull it out. You can't?
Is that okay? So this is a very simple, straightforward building, and but I had three sort of framework questions. The city went through a very extensive Eastern Gateway planning project a number of years ago. I know the current zoning is CDA, and that planning concept is basically that. It's a visioning planning statement. Has Maritime Electric and the planning staff had any discussions with respect to accommodating the vision as the plant goes through this major transformation? Because planning is both time sensitive as well as meshing together many different parts of ongoing change. So has that been any part of the discussion as the demolition plans are proceeding?
Yes, when the city was developing the Eastern Gateway plan and there was a number of different drawings that were put forward, we did have considerable discussion with the city because we recognize that there's a number of key elements of our plant operation down there that must remain.
Yep.
And we have a high voltage transmission substation and transmission lines that feed the eastern part of also Prince Edward Island, run over the transmission line that runs over the Hillsborough Bridge. That combustion turbine will serve an area that it would be greater than also the Charlottetown area. So we recognize that we always will need the property, but we also recognize that it's in a key place in the entrance of the city. So when we further develop, we want to ensure that we try to make it fit in as well as possible and be as innocuous as possible. We took steps 3 years ago, even while we made the application to our regulator to decommission the plant. And we filed that in 2018, that we knew then if we add more trees, that by the time we go to tear down the plant, some of the trees will grow even further. And just along the Water Street bypass will look more attractive. It is an industrial site. As we rebuild our substation designs, we're now using structural steel buswork and in some locations low profile steel. Just we know we need to be there, but it's part of the objective is try to be as least industrial as possible.
So I respect it's an industrial building, but if you go back to the slide that shows the vision looking at your existing turbine from Grafton Street, it's basically a green space, and I believe the Rails to Trails traverses part of that property.
Yeah.
And I really would encourage Maritime Electric, who's always been a good corporate citizen, to go to the next level to look at landscaping and how you protect this gateway to the city that is a major arterial that has a tremendous investment for Holland College on Grafton Street and its residents on the corner. So I understand how engineering design works, and your building is an engineer's dream. It bears no aesthetic considerations. And certainly from the streetscape perspective, there's nothing to show me today that you're both sensitive to the issue on the short term, or that you're looking at the long term recognition that as a custodian for this land that is in the hands of Maritime Electric, a private corporation, but you live and die by the revenue stream from all of the citizens of PEI. So I really think that gateway concept should be part of a ongoing discussion with a cooperative spirit of not just looking at protecting your land base, but looking at being a partner in the true sense with the community. That's the challenge.
Yes.
I throw out.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree. The balance, and we do like to think that, you know, we can certainly work within the community. You know, the Rails for Trails does, we work that it does cross our property, but, you know, we're in the neighborhood and we want to be able to remain welcome in the neighborhood.
So the second question is, there's some industrial heritage present on the site. There's some brick structures that date back a fair bit of time, I believe. And there's also a liability issue in terms of, as I understand it, prior to the creation of Maritime Electric or its predecessors, there was a coal gasification plant on that site. And my understanding is that the residues from coal gasification has very, very significant impacts on the land base in terms of environmental challenges. In past, many of our land use developments have not dealt with true remediation. And not to point fingers, but there have been sort of projects on the waterfront where the contaminated soil or the residues from its industrial phase has just been buried on site. And what that really is doing is putting the burden of liability on future generations, because we are always going through the process of intensifying land use, and this is valuable land within the city. So I would hope that the city fathers and guardians, not being sexist in my term, but the guardians through the council, are putting due emphasis when you go through the permitting process of ensuring that all aspects of mediation and remediation and cleanup of the site are anticipated and part of the budgeted process. I understand that you've already started that discussion with IRAC because you need to get the authorization to spend the money. But I would again caution against just dealing with the physical demolition without dealing with the remediation. It's an important future investment for the citizens of Charlottetown. Thank you.
Angus, do you wish to respond or just take that in?
No, it is certainly something when we look at the use and the prior use of the property. And, you know, through our environmental assessment, we look at what type and what's the nature of any contaminant that is there, and then the advice on what's the best way to deal with it.
Well, I usually find that when you get into that discussion, it's usually what's the lowest cost way to deal with it at the present. And I'm seeing this as a major shift to the welcomed, very welcomed demolition of the existing steam plant. I think everybody in the community is going to support that. That's not the question. I just believe that it should not be the lowest cost remediation. It should be the one that balances the public support that we as taxpayers invest and give to the corporation through its rate structure to maintain and improve and sustain into the future the land which has been damaged by its current and previous occupations. It's a philosophical point that we can't continue to bury our contaminations. We have to take the brave step not only to look at environmental sustainability in terms of all aspects of our energy profile, but when it comes to the land, there's an important principle of the current landowner having the responsibility to clean up its pollution. And
Yes, and it is a consideration on certainly brownfields, on reusing them in industrial use. And, you know, what are the risks of taking the soil out and, you know, can you get it properly treated, or are you contaminating another site by taking it to another location? And that's where we take the advice of the environmental.
Having worked on brownfield reclamation sites for national companies, and including a former coal gasification site, it's really just a matter of investing the money to do the right job. And I've built grocery stores on contaminated sites. It took a fair bit of capital investment to bring the land back to a usable state. And that is the visioning that is present in the sort of Eastern Gateway project, is that this land base is going to go through a significant change, hopefully. and whether or not the plans that have been developed to date are the correct or most advantageous. The reality is there's only one access point from all of eastern PEI into Charlottetown. It's the Hillsborough Bridge that puts a significant and growing population on Grafton Street and Water Street that is seeing this land, and it is going to continue to grow in value. It may be industrial today, but I think as you look at the institutional use surrounding it of Holland College, the repopulation of the residential east end of the city, the tourism investments in hotels in that area, it's a changing landscape. And to visualize that through planning and recognition, now's the time to lay out the framework for ensuring the adequacy of the future vision. I'm just preaching and I'm past by 5 minutes.
Yeah, no,
Thank you.
no, and Brian, I appreciate your comments. I'm sure that Kim Griffin and the Maritime Electric Comms team appreciate the information they gave tonight, as along with Angus and Ryan. Any questions from the audience? And if you do want to, please just, could we get the mic put back up in the right space? Just introduce yourself and your name and where you're from. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Thurah. I'm from the Hardy Miller Road, a community of the North Shore. And as a follow-up to the subjects, I'm looking at the subject property. I don't see the building location or the intended access to the building. But I think also the original rail bed goes right through that property, if I'm correct. Is that correct?
Yes, there was a rail line that ran onto that property. It would have gone through the Joe Giz Park.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
It goes through the Jogis. So who has title to that railway easement or whatever it is? Who has title to that now?
It's my understanding, everything within our footprint, we have the title to all of that.
Who had title when the railway went through there?
Who had title when the?
When the
it may-
railway was
Yeah,
still
it
going
may have
through there?
been even back to the Prince Edward Island Railroad.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know.
And how did it get from the Prince Edward Island Railroad to Maritime Electric?
Long before my
Are
time,
there-
John.
are there legal documents that you can prove it's your property?
Oh, yes, yeah. I'm
Have
confident
you
on that.
tabled them with the planning board?
We can demonstrate our ownership of all that property down there. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Just to follow up what was said here, it would be nice, from the rails to trails, to have a route through there to get to the downtown. I'm a biker, okay?
yeah.
You end up in Joe Giz Park, you take your life in your own hands when you get there by a bicycle, especially an old fellow like me.
Yeah. And we did allow the rails to trails to come across the property next to our green shed that's on Richmond Street.
Where is it shown on these documents?
It may not be shown. Can you go back to just one of the slides of the property?
Alex, just while they're
Okay.
looking, just Angus, Alex, is that part of the application, what's being asked here, or can we get some information that will take it to planning board? Could you just use the mic here, Alex, up here?
Use this one.
Yeah, this part of the application is, that's not what they've applied for. And, any existing agreements or whatever would be still in place, but I suspect that they don't exist. So, again, There are provisions in the Eastern Gateway Master Plan for some bike networks. That whole area is going to be redefined in the near future, and we want to make sure and work with Maritime Electric that we don't lose anything as a component of the Eastern Gateway Master Plan. But to my knowledge, we're not losing anything in this application. Maritime Electric is going to be there in the future. We have been in discussions with a number of other, I would refer to them as big moves that may mutually benefit Maritime Electric and the city as things move along. But in regard to the trail through the property, I don't think there's does that trail still exist? Yeah.
This is, right here is where we've allowed the trail to go across property. What Mr. Terrell was talking about is this railway right-of-way that used to come in here. And that would end up dissecting the property. But this is what we've, in working with the city, allow the path across our property. So we do allow the trespassing of the property in a trail, John, but it's just not the railroad right away.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Just introduce yourself, please. I think we know you.
My name's Amy Doyle. I live on Cumberland Street, across the street from the big plant. Is that the plant that's coming down, the steam one?
That's correct.
And is that all going to be green space with the Eastern Gateway that Brian was talking about? Is that the plan? That's my big concern. I don't want another great big building going up across the street.
No, the plan, our regulator, IRAC, asked for a long-term plan on the property before it is as part of the information that they gathered for the decision-making of approving the tear down of the plant.
Okay.
And in the grander scheme of things, the footprint, we look at it as requiring the substation to remain and eventually being rebuilt. We can see the eventuality of, as the technology improves, battery storage, and possibly in the future, additional standby generation. The nature of the generation that we see as being a part of our mix on Prince Edward Island is called its standby dispatchable generation.
Mm-hmm.
For the vast majority of the time, it sits idle.
I realize that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's when the supply gets interrupted
Mm-hmm.
and it becomes a security of supply issue.
Mm-hmm.
And then you run it to generate electricity. You don't run these things all the time because the nature of the electricity that they produce is very expensive. And it's like having a big backup generator, but for, the greater Charlottetown area and part of PEI's needs. So I can see, more optimum use of the property because it is a large industrial building and we will have room to work with. But we also, we do recognize that we're one of the first things you see when you come in to the city or when you're driving along the city.
It's the only thing I see when I get out.
Yeah. But I don't think, when you look at the scale of what's there,
Mm-hmm.
like this here is, the big building this is called the new end of the plant that was
Mhm.
built in the early 60s.
Yes.
And it's really 4 stories high.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can't see anything 4 stories ever being put back on the plant property.
So will there be green space
And
on the end
and
of that,
we-
like the
we-
Eastern
yes.
plan of,
we-
that's what the discussion was. at that other
yes,
meeting.
again, as part of, working with the neighborhood and being good neighbors and for our own interest too, because as our employees are down there, it's nicer to have a nicer working environment too.
That was my question. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Angus. And Angus, that also includes taking down the 2 smokestacks, as you said earlier, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions, comments? We have Team Maritime Electric here, so any questions from councillors? Okay, seeing none, we thank you, Angus, thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Kim.
Are you okay if I continue, Chair? Okay, perfect. Welcome, Terry McLeod. Thank you, Chair of Planning. So we will move on to our final application tonight, which is the Zoning and Development Bylaw PH-ZD-2, a proposed amendment in relation to pool covers, and Alex is going to make the presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Your Worship. This is an application to amend the zoning bylaw, specifically section 4.3 dealing with swimming pools, and it's to allow property owners who provide a certified motorized pool cover the option of not erecting the required 6-foot high fence around the perimeter of the swimming pool. So for those that aren't familiar with a pool cover, there is a myriad of types of pool covers. There's heat pool covers. There's a number of different types, but this is a certified pool cover. It meets a code standard. You can walk on that pool cover. I think it's required by the code standards that it can hold up to 485 pounds. So this issue came up, some of you may recall, in 2020 when a property owner, a homeowner asked for the same thing. They wished to remove the fence requirement in favor of the motorized certified pool cover. They brought it to staff's attention at that time that Alberta had changed their building code regulations to permit this type of use without the fence, and they wanted us to review it. At that time, staff had indicated we did do quite a bit of research. We made calls out to Alberta. This whole issue came to the fore in Alberta. You'll find when you do the research on this, pool covers and hot tub covers tend to be covered at the same time. And in some cases, hot tub covers are more of a concerning than pool covers because there's a lot more people have hot tubs. So the issue is you don't want kids to walk on the cover of a hot tub or a pool. So for whatever reason, Alberta they have very robust safety standards out there. They have a safety code, and under the umbrella of the safety codes is the provincial building code. They made amendments to allow you to remove the fence. So I started to look into why they did that, but I couldn't find the documentation. I mean, everybody's allowed to do it, do whatever they want in their province. Keep in mind, the national building code is a national standard, but the provinces can put additional requirements in it. So when this was brought to my attention in 2020, I researched what was going on in Alberta. I realized they had changed their provincial building code act. I directed the applicant at that time to go to the province, and at that time we were just bringing in the National Building Code here in PEI, and I said maybe they would contemplate changing the act similar to Alberta, and then every municipality could follow suit. So the response that came back from the province is that they don't regulate fences. Well, the issue wasn't the fence. The issue is we're being asked to remove the fence standard, which we regulate, but in favor of a different standard. So, that initial request didn't really go anywhere. And so then we had a second request just recently. Another property owner asked for the same thing. I'm not going to go through. These are very weighty slides, but you can see up there, that's from Alberta. It's their regulations dealing with swimming pools. You can see up in the corner, it's the Safety Code Council. They talk about what they regulate and, and all of the various provisions of swimming pools. But the key thing is that the National Building Code, the Alberta edition, provides criteria for design and construction of private swimming pools and for required protection. So again, they have very similar standards to Charlottetown in that code. It talks about the 6-foot high fence. We have that. An opening access through the fence around a private swim must be protected by a gate. We have that. Equipped with a self-closing device. We have that. Equipped with a latching device on the inside of the gate located not less than 5 feet away from, that's a higher provision than us and capable of being locked, higher than ours. But this is the key thing that came out of that review of the Alberta Code. As an alternative to installing a fence and gate to prevent unauthorized access to swimming pools, the Alberta National Building Code permits the use of protective covers. And that standard ASTM F1346 is the industry standard for any kind of a pool cover. So that we're able to figure that out, that if there is going to be a standard, that would be the standard. They say you need to get documentation from your pool company to validate these things that have a lockable device to prevent access to the water by unauthorized people. So, in this recent go-around, we've been provided material from both sides. I've gotten some material from people that are in favor, and I've got some material from people that want to keep the status quo. And again, I'm just trying to figure out what is the best thing to do. This is a standard Consumer Product Safety Commission. They have a lot of information on pools. And what you're going to find out when you get into swimming pools, because this is all new to me too, they're all called safety barriers. And the primary protection around a swimming pool is the human that should be overseeing what's happening around that pool. And then there's a number of different layers of protection you can provide. There is lots of research, 300 children, this is US based, but 300 children under 5 drown each year in backyard pools. They could be saved if the homeowners completely fenced in the pools. I mean, I'm just taking this, I'm not telling you this, I'm just finding this in the literature. Anyone who has cared for children, toddlers, know how fast that they move around, and they are inquisitive and impulsive, and they lack realistic sense of danger. And these make swimming pools particularly hazardous for households with young children. And so their report is indicating child drownings are the second leading cause of accidental death around the home for children under 5 years of age. And in southern or warm weather states, drowning is the leading cause of accidental death in the home for children under 5. They've also revealed that they've reviewed a great deal of data on drowning and child behavior, as well as information on pool barrier construction. The staff concluded that the best way to reduce child drowning in residential pools is for pool owners to construct and maintain barriers, and that's just not a fence, that will help to prevent young children from gaining access to the pools and spas. So they have guidelines and information for pool and spa owners to use, prevent children from, again, getting access to the pool. They take into consideration the variety of barriers, fences is one of them, available, and where each might be vulnerable to a child waiting to get on the other side. So the swimming pool barrier guidelines are presented with illustrated description of pool barriers. The definition of pools includes spas and hot tubs. The swimming pool barrier guidelines therefore apply to these structures as well. Again, these are just a lot of statistics that I was able to find. I mean, these aren't isolated incidents. I mean, if the United States has got 360 million people, but there are incidents where people who own a swimming pool, in fact, they are the most vulnerable. There are drownings from the neighbors, but it's the people who live, that own the pool that are at most at risk for accidental drowning. So again, over 4,100 children younger than 5 suffer submersion injuries and require emergency room treatment, but half are seriously injured and are admitted to the hospital. Just more detail on, this is a serious topic and it needs to be reviewed, very, very thoroughly. So again, they're talking about the barriers, and they indicate whatever the barrier you have, unless you've got a person overseeing and supervising the pool, nothing's foolproof unless you're there to protect kids. But they do provide layers of protection if there is a lapse of adult supervision, and barriers give parents additional time to find a child before the unexpected can occur. So they go, barriers include a fence or wall, door alarms for the house, and a power safety cover over the pool. And they use a number of guides. And they say barriers should be located to prohibit permanent structures, equipment, or similar objects from being climbed. They indicate a fence completely surrounding the pool is better than the one with the house serving as the fourth side. And this is important. I'm going to show you a picture. So there's different types of fence or pool designs and fences that you can have that are safer than the others. Most people have, they walk out of like a sliding door at the back of their property, and there's it's called the three-sided fence, and the pool is available right outside of the house. And then there's what's called a four-sided enclosure. They also talk about door alarms. So if you have young kids, you can have a door alarm. If the kid gets through it, the alarm goes off, and you can sort of detect that somebody's heading in the direction of the pool. So, these are just some visuals of it. The three-sided fencing is not as preferred, but I would say in many, many cases, that's what people are doing. You're walking from the house into the three-sided fence to prevent people from off of your property getting on, and therein lies the issue for dealing with safety. So then there's the four-sided fencing. You can see on the four-sided fencing, if you walk out of the house, and if you're a child or a neighbor, you can't get into that pool because it's going right around the perimeter, and then it gives you that they should be 4 feet. Ours is 6 feet. They also indicate that they should be able to be locked, right? So the first picture is just that it's got a self-latching gate, but then you can lock them. So, again, this is just from the literature. Again, there is a lot of literature on this, and I am by no means an expert. I'm just trying to cover both sides of the equation. So pool covers add another layer of protection, and there are a wide variety of styles on the market. Keep pool covers well maintained. Make sure the control devices are kept out of the hands of children. And again, this is from the Consumer Product Protection Product Safety Commission. Barriers and pool covers can reduce the risk of drowning. Again, they have if you put up the 4-foot high fence with no footholds or handholds, they should surround the entire pool. That's the four-sided version. And if a wall of the house serves as a side barrier, the house door should be protected with alarms. And then they go on to say, in addition to the barriers, a power safety cover should protect the pool when not in use. So the pool cover seems to me to be, it's to protect your children from your pool. It's another layer of protection in addition to the fence. There was some media on this issue. There was some commentary from the Life Saving Society of Ontario. They provided me with a number of fairly detailed studies. They all alluded to the provision of fences. I'm pretty confident that in Ontario, they're not, whoever I was discussing things with, I don't think they were aware of the Alberta situation, but I'm pretty confident that in Ontario, they adhere to the fence requirement. Just these are some things to think about. This municipality can legally amend the zoning bylaw, or we can bring in a separate swimming pool bylaw. A number of other places to deal with these issues, they create a swimming pool bylaw onto itself. There's pros and cons to that, both legally, administratively. The legal department did find where the city of Chilliwack did allow a similar approach to what they had done in Alberta. If you do have the certified pool cover, you meet certain standards, you can enter into an agreement with the municipality, but that agreement is dealing with, indemnifying the city from any harm, if any harm occurs in regard to an issue with that swimming pool cover. So it can be done. A provision requiring the existing owner, there is a concern that if you go into one of those agreements and set it up that a property owner accepts the indemnification on their swimming pool, the problem is if they sell the property and if we somehow don't catch that, then there is a concern over if something happens with the new owner and we don't have that legal indemnification, it may come back to us. So I just thought I'd point that. That's just an issue. So, again, at the end of the day, I just think these are some things the council may wish to consider. this is a life safety issue, and planners don't typically deal with life safety issues. The fence is really easy for us, but you may wish to have an individual with expertise in pool safety regulations provide information on the safety risks of the pool cover. It's been allowed other places. They had to rely on some information or some code standards or some data to presumably move in that direction. I don't have that information. And you may wish to determine exactly what the city needs to do by way of human and financial resources to safely administer, enforce, and inspect the pool standards. For example, is there special training involved to inspect these covers? What department and personnel, new or existing or appropriate for this job? So in conclusion, from my point of view, I mean, I'll help to facilitate this as much as I can, but I'm just indicating that I really don't think that a planner, I have the technical expertise. There is reams of studies out of Australia, the United States, and the other tricky thing is a lot of those studies are older, and the pool covers is a newer piece of technologies. I don't know whether there are newer studies, and I'm relying on older studies. And then staff feel that, again, this is a complicated topic that needs to be supported by the most current and up-to-date studies and safety code reviews. And this type of bylaw amendment has life safety implications that need to be reviewed carefully by qualified professionals before a final decision is rendered. And I will be pleased to answer any question I have. And there is a myriad of information on this, and that this is just scratching the surface. But I thought that I would try to do my best to kind of lay out the issues on both sides on this particular request. And I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Forbes, you went beyond your best because that's a lot of information. And I very much appreciate it. And I'm sure that the council members appreciate it and the planning board members that are here this evening. So we'll open the mic. Alex, can you stay up
Yeah,
there?
I will. Yep.
Just if you go to the mic, please introduce yourself and where you're from, Charlottetown, wherever. Thank you.
Hi, folks. I'm Dr. Peter McPherson. I'm one of the pediatricians at the QE. My colleagues and I are here this evening because we're concerned that the proposed bylaw amendment, as it was just laid out by Mr. Forbes, is going to increase the risk of children drowning in our community. We know, as you laid out, that drowning remains a leading and preventable cause of death in young children. And really, it's kids age 1 to 4 that are at the highest risk. So we're talking about toddlers. Pool fencing is one of many layers of protection that can prevent children from drowning. And as Mr. Forbes alluded to, really the standard is multiple layers of protection. So diligent adult supervision, pool fencing, other methods of preventing drowning. And we have very clear evidence that four-sided pool fencing saves lives. That's why it's recommended by the World Health Organization, the Canadian Pediatric Society, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Canadian Drowning Prevention Research Centre, the National Life Saving Society, and others. Now, as to the question of pool covers, I think the weight that they can hold or whether someone my size and weight can walk across one is completely irrelevant. The salient thing is laid out in Mr. Forbes' analysis. It says, issues will invariably come up in the event that a property owner chooses not to close the pool cover when they are away or during the day. So you can very easily imagine a situation where a homeowner who has had the right to a fence waived has one of these pool covers, opens the pool in the morning, goes in to fix lunch. Their teenagers have opened the pool in the afternoon, go off and do something else. The pool is unattended. There is no fence around it. A toddler from next door comes in and drowns. One of the things that jumps out to me in the very comprehensive analysis you conducted is the discussion around legal liability and indemnity agreements. And I think really beyond that fairly dry language, really what we're talking about is the fact that a child may die. And so when we're talking about liability and shifting that from the city to an individual homeowner, the liability we're talking about is bereaved parents suing someone for millions of dollars. Clearly, the better solution here is to just have fewer children drowning. From my perspective, I can see there are two upsides of this proposal discussed by Mr. Forbes. One is that there will be lower cost for homeowners. Number two is the aesthetics. So for example, the proposal references not obstructing ocean views or just more favorable landscaping. From my perspective, The right of our children in this community to safety should take priority over these concerns. When I think about a pool, really we're talking about a 5 or 6 figure expense. So it's a privileged few that we're talking about who can afford these pools. If you can afford to put in an in-ground pool, you can afford a fence. If you do not like the look of a fence, do not put in a pool. We are talking at the end of the day about the safety of children in our community and 2 homeowners.
Thank you, Doctor. Mr. Goody?
Yes, thank you very much. I'd like to speak to this matter, and at the outset, I feel I should declare that I was the employee of the city of Charlottetown at the time. The city of planning and development officer put this provision into the zoning development bylaw. And I must compliment your manager of the department. He did an excellent overview of the entire thing. At that time, I researched most of the major cities across Canada and found that a fence enclosure was a standard requirement in all the jurisdictions that I researched. It was considered a basic standard requirement for safety. As of this week, I confirmed that the major cities in every province in Canada still require a fence or other suitable barrier to be constructed around backyard pools. And I did read the material from Alberta and noted that even many provinces have requirements for fences. And they put those in provincial regulations. How that interplays with the municipal regulations in Alberta, I'm not quite sure. It would seem to me that the provincial regulations would prevail. It surprises me that the city of Charlottetown would even consider removing such a safety requirement, or that a property owner would take on such a risk. You're talking about inspection requirements. I'm pretty familiar with what's involved in the inspection requirements, but you can put a fence around and you can put a self-closure in a fence. Your inspectors can go and make sure that's operating. They can do periodic inspections to see if it's still in compliance. But a pool cover that goes over based on the pressing of a button, I don't know how often you're going to have inspectors going around inspecting that. It's going to be quite a requirement. And to rely on an indemnity clause from a homeowner to take on the responsibility, the legal responsibility the city might have, I wouldn't want to count on that. I worked with the city long enough to know that it's pretty hard to write a clause to prevent you from a legal action, no matter what a homeowner takes on. And why would you ever give up multiple layers of protection? Even if they do have a cover, why would you give up another proven standard that's worldwide? My recommendation, and a strong recommendation, would be that you leave the bylaw as it's written and not take the risk of removing it, because the results could be tragic. Thank you.
Just for the record, that's Mr. Harry Goody, former CAO of Charlottetown. Thank you, Harry. Mic's open.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Kathy Morrison. I'm also a pediatrician working at the QEH. I'm the less famous Dr. Morrison. So in addition to being a pediatrician and having followed the guidelines and reading the guidelines that Dr. McPherson spoke about, I'm also a pool owner who happens to have one of these automatic covers. And we, in fact, have had that installed for the past 12 years since we built the pool. So I feel that I can speak to you from both personal experience as well as professional. I think that the intent, and having read one of the homeowners' letters, is certainly that we all want children's best interests at heart. And you could see in the letter from Chris Sinclair that they really just wanted to ensure that children were safe, and they did a lot of research to ensure that they picked the best method. I agree that the locked cover is an excellent method, but it is in addition to the fence. It by itself is not sufficient. There have been countless times when our pool cover has been broken. And so the pool is either locked open, half open, or shut, which is the safest position. But when locked open, you're at the mercy of the pool repair people, the equipment. A rope could break on the pulley mechanism and you're left for weeks and weeks with an open pool with no surroundings if you've elected not to use a fence. The one thing nobody has also mentioned is that even when locked closed, the pool does not allow any rainwater to penetrate. So there are inches of deep water that a child can fall into and drown because, as we mentioned, it takes only a few inches of water. So I would encourage you to please continue to encourage the multiple levels of safety in our community. As an example, once we got airbags in cars, we didn't suddenly stop using seat belts. We layer things to keep people as safe as possible. So please consider that both these mechanisms together will be helpful, but do not do away with the fence because somebody has opted to put an electronic or automatic pool cover. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison.
Councillors, Your Worship, my name is Robert Bruce and I am a resident of Brighton. I only have a few comments to make because previous speakers have addressed a number of my points. I would just like to point out that time is of the essence in regards to addressing this matter. This is not just simply an application for a change in the bylaw. We have more than a single property owner in the city who has already gone ahead, installed a pool without a fence with just this single line of protection. So we're not dealing with the consideration of what we are going to deal with tomorrow. We're dealing with the reality of an unresolved situation today that is not being addressed by the current bylaw. So that means there are no guidelines, which means that we have no ability in regards to managing a current situation. So my request is really to deal with this matter and come back to the public with actually a well thought out and functional change to the bylaw that would address all the elements of enforcement and inspection so that we can understand if this was an alternative, how that would be actually functioning and would be protecting everybody that would impact. The other comment I just want to make is that in these notes here, it's a 33-page document that you've made available to the public. The vast majority of this is about liability. Liability is planning for failure. I would like us to refocus on focusing on safety. So when we look at comparisons of fences with gates that are open, as the comparative, let's look at fences and what else we can add to the bylaw that would make fences safe. There's more additional requirements to fencing gates and latches that we can add to our existing bylaw that make that a better environment so that we have practical safety for our community. And as it relates to, with the pool cover, there is nothing in here about what we're expecting for the property owner that is using this as their primary mode of protection. There's no performance standard. We're not saying that it can be open for an hour, a day, or a week, so we have nothing right now. Before you could be coming forward to say, here's an alternative, I think you have an obligation to come back to the public and say, here is the minimum standard, and here's how we would be enforcing that. But as it relates to the Red Cross, because there was a mention in here that you never got any commentary back from the Red Cross. The great thing about the Red Cross is that they speak to it directly on their own website. And on their website in regards to backyard pools, their number one recommendation is a fence. And they have a whole list of recommendations, but they don't mention covers as an alternative. So I think we have our answer from Red Cross. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Bruce, thank you very much. And I know that Mr. Forbes and the planning department have been working on summary offense ticketing that will cover more than just pools. It will cover all infractions under the zoning and development bylaws. So that is in the process. And I believe we understand what you're talking about, that there's already a pool that is existing at this point in time that has to be addressed through our summary offense ticketing. Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'm Dr. Heather Flieger. I'm also one of the general pediatricians here in Charlottetown. My colleagues have not left much for me to say. As a citizen here of the province and of the city, I'm concerned about the capital city setting a precedent on this matter by allowing simply just one layer of protection and getting rid of the pool fences. as Mr. Forbes, maybe doctor, I don't know, as Mr. Forbes mentioned in his research, the research about drowning and the evidence for pools is old. And because it's very sad evidence, it's based off of an accumulation of studies of children who drowned. It's kind of like studying parachutes. The evidence is old, but at some point you have to say, we know what we know. I'm excited about these pool covers and about the standards that they're held to, but humans are prone to error. Multiple layers of protection still make sense until this particular method has a proven track record, perhaps many years down the road, to say, you know, this is also key in a layer of defense. But until that can be stated as a matter of fact from studies, I don't see why we're in a hurry to get rid of those multiple layers of protection. Thanks.
Thank you, Doctor. Any more comments, questions?
Again, I'm Louis Newman. I'm here to support these pediatricians because I think everything they've said is cogent, true, and I would not like to see this bylaw changed to go to pool covers. Let me give you one example. You have the pool cover off. I don't know how long it takes for one of these motorized pool covers to open, but I'm sure it takes almost as long to close. Now, in the middle of a hot afternoon like today, you have your children in the pool or around the pool, and the phone rings in the house. Parent goes off to answer the phone, leaving the thing unattended. And another situation. Father goes to get a beer out of the fridge in the house. It'll always be the father that does this, right? And leaves the thing unattended. The only extra thing I have to say is that you can ask homeowners to indemnify the city if you want. But if my child went next door to somebody's pool with a cover open and drowned, or worse, was permanently injured, I would sue that guy and I would sue the city, regardless of the indemnification. I don't think any town or municipality is going to be able to get out of some responsibility for the safety of toddlers. Toddlers are important. And in those statistics, we probably all focused in on the number of deaths in the States. Divide that by 10 in Canada, you'll come pretty close. There were about 350 deaths, as I recall. No, there were over 500 deaths in the States due to drownings in a year. But there were thousands of kids who suffered immersion injury, i.e. brain injury, and these children are going to be requiring permanent care, a lot of them, into adulthood. This is an enormous expense, and a terrible tragedy. The injuries really are worse than the deaths. And I would like you to keep that in mind as you debate this in council. I just see no way of taking away the fence as the primary method of safety to protect young children. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Newman. Thank you very much. And just come to the mic, give your name and where you're from, and please.
Daniel Cousins, Ward 5, just a little taller. Now, we've already had great testimony from a variety of doctors. Oh, sorry. So we've already had great testimony from a couple of doctors here, and I'm not a doctor, but my end goal of education is a PhD. Furthering with statistics, half of the drownings, things that happen in private pools are for children under, or half of drownings for ages 5 and under happen in outdoor private pools. And according to Pursuit.com, four-side pool fencing can prevent 7 out of 10 drownings in children under 5. To add to the statistics from the Life Saving Society of Canada, in 2018's report on drownings of children's age 0 to 4, 67% were unsupervised, 31% were distracted under supervision. The bylaw we have works. It takes one human error with these covers and tragedy can hit. We all know we forget things. If these things have a remote, how many of us have lost the remote after just putting it down? It really does not take much to have it. They break down in a certain condition. There is time. We all know how hard it is to get a repair person these days in Prince Edward Island. This is just adding to the risk. Yes. We should not be even here discussing this if only 2 people have asked because they don't want to pay for a fence when they can afford the luxury of these pools. Pools either pay for the fence or don't have the pool. This is not a huge debate. Hey, if they don't want to put in a fence, I will direct them to the part of the bylaw 4.3.4. Put in an inflatable temporary one, you get the pool, you don't have to have the fence. We should not be putting innocent children in risk just so someone doesn't spoil their view of a beach. Get with the program. There's many ways you could build a fence that you don't spoil a view of a beach either. It just is going to cost more. I will end by quoting Helen Lovejoy from The Simpsons. Please, won't you think of the children?
Thank you, Daniel. I do want to appreciate all the effort that you put into this, Alex. And I believe that as for a council and for the citizens of Charlottetown, 2, 3, whatever the number of the request, it has enlightened all of us. And I want to thank the doctors for their participation and what they've added to this discussion, because this is what governance is about, and that is about public input. And that's where we're coming from tonight. So if anyone else wishes to come up. So I'm going to go to the agenda, introduction of new business, no new business. I need a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor McCabe, second by Councillor Duffy. All those in favor? Thank you very much for coming tonight.